What's happening, guys? Happy Wednesday. Here we are with another BG cast. I want to give a couple of shout outs to my new followers on Rumble, OPS. Thank you, man. And I believe it's Jill as well. Thanks for the follow. I really appreciate you guys. I'm grateful. You all are the reason I do this. And other people like us. So, as you can see, I got a bandage here. One of my client's dogs nipped at me today. That was the first time in my life. I've owned dogs my whole life, and I've always been a dog guy, and never been bit. So first time. It's okay though, because I have rescues. I got two Choco Lab Pit Bull Terrier mixes upstairs. Always making a ruckus, always making a commotion. So it did not do anything for my love of dogs. It did not do anything to it. I still love dogs. I just understand. Sometimes rescues are rescues. They act kind of funky. So we were talking about spiritual sovereignty and discernment earlier, and I believe these are two important things to have in the world today, especially for people like us when we're looking for these little bits of truth in this sea of lies. And there's even people on our side of the fence, guys, or who claim to be on our side of the fence, who are only saying half-truths, capitalizing off of it, vice versa. Some of the points the alchemist, aka Sarah, brings up in this video, I think are very valid, and we're going to talk and break them down. So hopefully I've gotten all over my audio hiccups from last time. I already had the video queued up and ready to go, so we're going to take a look. Let's do it, guys. Yeah, computer's wanting to act funky, but it's going through. There we go. All right, let's see what she
One
says.
of the biggest areas that we place our focus on within the spiritual community, as well as the conscious community, is protection. Protection and shielding ourselves is one of the most common and universal themes that we all are concerned with. So today I'm going to be talking about the extra metaphysical benefits of discernment and how discernment protects one along their spiritual awakening journey.
All right, so one thing I want to say real fast, okay, is as somebody who's been on a spiritual path for 15 years at this point, protection, what she means by protection is, yes, definitely protect yourself from negative energies and things like that. But what she's really meaning by protection is what we're kind of getting into, the discernment. You're protecting your psyche, you're protecting your vibration, your frequency from the exterior sources that can interfere with it. So let's get on back to it.
First, it's important to know that discernment is the complete opposite of judgment. In fact, we resort to judgment when we lack discernment. Judgment is rooted in our egoic and programmed self. It's not coming from our true intuition or clarity. It's not activating our holistic ability for intelligence. Discernment is when our intellect and our intuition have integrated and merged. So
one thing I really like that she touches base on here, at least on this one, is the egoic self. And that's something, I think we all struggle to battle. And, I really like to use the representation. Some of you guys might not like this, but I like to use the representation of Shiva and how he wore the serpent around his neck, which is symbolizing the ego. And basically having your ego as an ornament. The ego is an important thing to exist here, or else we would just be one with everything all the time, and we would neglect our bodily functions, other things as well. So many of you who have taken a serious psychedelic trip could probably understand what it would be like being an ego death constantly. So, and let's keep on going.
discernment is coming from an awakened state of being, whereas judgment is coming from predispositions, prejudice, fear, a need to feel superior or a sense of superiority, lack of information, or denial. So all of these distinct temperaments belong to judgment, and judgment is of our lower nature or our programmed self. whereas discernment is coming from our connection to our higher self. So when we're implementing more of our capacity for discernment, we're also reinforcing our connection with our higher self, because we are practicing the attributes of our higher self. And by doing so, we link up with a feedback loop so that our higher self has a better direct connection to be able to inform us. So
I'll try to keep my little cut-in short and sweet, because, this is a commentary. I don't want, I'm sure you guys have done your own research and watched the video yourself at this point. But what she's talking about, how discernment is when intellect and intuition merge. And this is where I think, I kind of touched a base on how the divine feminine has come in that wave that it has, and now I think the divine masculine is going to come a little bit to balance it out, is because you look at today, especially in the Sevid situation, and the judgment from the one side about everything. They want their amnesty now, by the way, but the never forget, don't, because it'll happen again. The judgment coming from that side, all that, there was no intuition and intellect aligned, because I feel personally with that situation, you guys are going to hear me bring up this situation a lot, because I used to always joke when I was a kid, when the old timers would always be like, especially people like my dad and my uncles being like, back in the 70s, it was a different time, blah, blah, blah. And I'll tell you what, dude, at the ripe young age of 35, the world is a very different place from where I came from. It definitely is. So, but judgment is a low frequency. It is a low frequency to be in. This is why judging people is really pointless, man. And how she talks about the higher self and the feedback loop. When you do align with your higher self, you will receive what I would call like a energetic feedback loop, and it will help you and gear you in the right direction. Well, back to it. Right.
We practice the way appears in front of us. And with this discernment is linking us to a higher plane of consciousness. Now that's important when it comes to protection, because when we think of what we need protection from, we're typically thinking of things of a metaphysical nature. Even though many of us fear very real and very tangible things that are strictly of a third dimensional, physical nature, typically, when we speak overall about this topic of protection, we're usually referring to it in a metaphysical sense, meaning we need protection from the metaphysical. And so discernment is the number one faculty that comes into play when we're speaking about this, whether we're talking about it from the third dimensional point of view or a higher metaphysical point of view. And that's because discernment works on both planes of consciousness. You could think of discernment as a...
God, see, this is why I love her. I love her because she can explain things in a way that not even some of the most seasoned vets I listen to can explain. And discernment does work in both realities, and most certainly does. And this is why nowadays, a lot of people, when they think of warfare and everything going on around us right now, they think of physical warfare. But no, we have a lot of spiritual warfare going on. We have a lot of psychological warfare going on. Seabit, that whole situation. So, a massive psychological warfare. And props to the ones who survived it. You know what I mean? But it's definitely, yeah. So let's get back to it.
Cross. What happens is, the more we incur and practice the faculty of discernment, what we're doing is connecting and linking more and more with our higher self. And by doing so, what that does is not just protect us on the physical plane And how it would protect us on the physical plane is through preventative action. So we would have the discernment used in the capacity of foresight. And with the foresight, we're able to take measures before we have to get to a dire place with them. So in its most mundane and practical form, discernment is helping us navigate the third dimensional plane by making better choices with foresight so that we don't end up in dire situations with dire consequences.
Okay, this is what this was the part I remember now that I really wanted to talk about. So the foresight thing, all right? I think it's typical of the common person every day, or nowadays, I should say. It's very typical that they only focus on what's right in front of them, and they only care and do actions about what's right in front of them, and they do not care about any future outcomes that might happen 5, 10, 15 years down the road at this point, especially with the situation that just passed us. I mean, it's, foresight allowing things like digital vaccine passports, allowing everything that was meant to, that happened to happen, us allowing it, and of course they use the almighty fear to manipulate and to scare people about something that is not scary at all, okay? And I think now, 2.5 years after the fact, we can see that it's not fucking scary. And look at everybody who's still, at this point, still not admitting they've been duped. And I guess what I'm really getting at here is the people get so caught up in the mainstream narrative and the emotion and how they always grab you by the emotion with the fear. You got to be afraid. You have to be afraid. Why do you think World War III rolled out immediately after COVID died? Because everybody needs to be afraid. That's what they want. So and don't let your fear inhibit you from looking into the future and seeing the consequences of your actions. Do not. Okay? Because freedom is a very spiritual thing. You guys, I don't know whether you're Christian, whether you're Catholic, whatever, dude. I mean, freedom is a very spiritual thing. And having the freedom for our bodies, our movements, and things that we don't need a government to tell us what we need to do. Okay, so this is a very big thing. I want you guys to really take this in because that to me speaks volumes. And back to it. I'm going to let it run for a little bit because it's a 16-minute video. Probably let it run for a few minutes and then I'll say a couple more things here.
Now, how this works with discernment linking us with protection into the metaphysical plane is that as we are navigating the third dimensional plane, if we are not linked to our higher self, or if we are not linked to a higher plane, then what ends up happening is that we're only navigating this plane based off of the knowledge of the third dimension, meaning we don't have discernment or awareness of the higher planes of consciousness, be they of a positive or negative orientation. And so what's happening is that once we develop strong discernment, we start connecting with our higher self, and by doing so, now our higher self has more of an ability to help navigate us on that plane. So do you see how us practicing discernment on the third dimension is what aligns us with our higher self? And the reason it aligns us with our higher self is because discernment is an attribute of our highest self. So when we're practicing the higher attributes, we're now embodying our higher self. And through that practicing, now we are connecting with the higher self, and our higher self, because it is just another form of saying our future self, is able to feed us resources into our experience in the past, aka this present moment. So the higher self now is able to, you could look at it as intervene, because there's a certain level of alignment that has been established. If feedback loops with the future is too woo, then you could also just look at the same concept as once you practice discernment, that's a higher vibratory level of consciousness.
Nothing's too woo anymore.
And when you have a higher vibratory level of consciousness, you are now incrementally raising your frequency. You can raise your frequency to meet your higher self or your future self in the middle. And by
So, one thing I want to talk about real fast, in case anybody is new to the term frequency, vibration, things like that. So, a little bit of a physics lesson. So, we have something called the wave-particle duality. So, what this means is that atoms, quarks, gluons, everything within the structure of space-time itself, it can be looked at either particles or waves. And each particle has its wave counterpart. As an electrician, I can tell you that the AC current sine wave is a wave. It's a frequency. We use the 60 cycle frequency here in the United States, which is actually not a good frequency of AC current to use. It's pretty nasty. So, and raising your frequency means that you are vibrating your waveform at a higher rate. Now, one thing I would implore you all to look at, if some of you are still skeptical about this, is to look at cymatics. And actually, I'll link a video to cymatics under this video once we're done recording here. What cymatics is, so when you place sound through a medium, such as a non-Newtonian liquid like cornstarch and water, or you use sand, or you use a Cialdini plate with sand, things like that, and you play a frequency through it, you get geometrically precise geometry that the sound waves produce. So, where this kind of all lines up together is if you're vibrating, you're producing this geometry, right? And we'll do a podcast about sacred geometry sometime too. I used to teach sacred geometry at a holistic center back on the East Coast, but you're vibrating, and as you're vibrating, there's this visual geometry occurring, and the lower frequencies don't have very good geometry, and the higher frequencies have this very articulate, precise, beautiful geometry. And I mean, if you even look at languages like Sanskrit and even Hebrew, the cymatics that occur from those sayings are very beautifully and geometrically profound. So I do believe that there is something to this. I mean, you look at physics, what I just said, and then you look at cymatics about what I just said, and you put those two together, and you're like, shit, dude, my body is vibrating these freaking geometrical sound waves at all times. And you look at the universe, it's all geometry. Everything. I mean, even from our single-celled life, all the way to, even vegetables and fruits in nature. You see the phi ratio. You see the Fibonacci sequence. You see these things. So this is what it means to vibrate in harmony. Thought I'd give that little explanation real quick.
in doing so, that anchors us into a higher level of consciousness, making the levels of consciousness that are vibrating below wherever our frequency is currently occupying no longer able to interact with us. So, in its most metaphysical sense, discernment acts as a huge protection and a barrier because we are no longer a vibrational match to certain consciousness levels, meaning certain realms, and what occupies those realms. This is also why it is so important when we are raising our vibration, and therefore our frequency, to be concerned with integrating our shadow and shadow aspects. It's because if we have blind spots that we are unconsciously operating from, then we're not able to access our full capacity for discernment because we're coming from a projection, or we're coming from a denial or a fear. Any type of area that we aren't aware of within the self, now we have as an external barrier because it's blocking us from true discernment. So discernment is what protects us on multiple levels of reality. And yet discernment should not be equated with hypervigilance, because sometimes along our spiritual journey, we end up getting stuck in a state of hypervigilance and actually believe that that is us practicing discernment, and that's not.
So that's something I really, as somebody who who has been hypervigilant before. I mean, I got to be honest. When I first woke up or became awakened back in 2008, I was a very zealous about it. I'm very hypervigilant. So, actually, some people will probably still remember my Facebook being Stephen Amun Ra Stathis. Yeah. So that was about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So you do a lot of growing. But that is true. You don't want to be hypervigilant because then you do get caught. You get caught in a trap. And she's going to get into that trap. Come on, OBS. There we go.
When we're in a state of hypervigilance, in fact, what that can do is end up drawing more experiences into our field and into our reality that are coming to confirm that we need to be hypervigilant. So it's a self-defeating prophecy, because what we're doing is when we're in hypervigilance and we're pretty much stuck in that mode, is we're coming from paranoia. And paranoia is not discernment. Discernment also includes within it the ability to feel free and safe enough to be creative, to exert our free will. And when you're exerting your power and your free will, you're innately not in a state of hypervigilance. So even though discernment has clarity and intellect and the ability to filter whatever harmful information is coming through, it can filter it through the logic. It's still not coming from a state of a place of being of fear. Whereas paranoia and hypervigilance are coming from that level of consciousness. They're coming from a certain vibrational level. And in that level of reality, you can be a match to so many different experiences that come and confirm that you should be paranoid, and they also come and confirm that you need to be in a state of hypervigilance. Whereas discernment has this beautiful balancing act, this beautiful harmonic dance that it does, where we are incurring new information, and it's not always going to be pleasant, and we're not shutting ourselves off to things that we need to learn to be aware of. So because we're not in denial of any negative aspects of this reality, and because we're not in denial of any positive aspects of this reality, we have this beautiful harmony where we're able to understand and hold more awareness. And by doing so, we're able to balance our actions and navigate better. So we're able to not only take preventative actions, we're also able to protect ourselves and assert ourselves with our own free will.
So, I like that. Our own free will. You know, it was always said that the human being is technically one of the highest forms of life in the universe because we have free will. We have that. It's a beautiful thing. So, I definitely agree with the awareness she's talking about. I am myself striving for that. I'd maybe say about a third of the way there, even through 15 years. I mean, who knows? Something might happen to push me above half. We'll see. You know, but I mean, all she's saying is gold. She's explaining it for me. Let's get back to it.
Whereas when we're coming from a place of hypervigilance, what we're actually doing is just confirming our reality needs to be defended and protected. So with discernment, we have stronger psychic protection, but our attention is not hyper-focused on protection. And because of that, we have more quality of life, which allows for more creative freedom, which only breeds more sovereignty and more higher order thinking and capacity for higher order concepts. All of this is, you could think of like a spiral upward. Whereas if we think that we're coming from a place of discernment, we have used our logic to orient us into a state of paranoia and hypervigilance. Our nervous system actually is locked into that state and isn't developing a feedback loop with our higher self. So what we're doing is having confirmation bias from all of the experiences that we're having enter our field, rather than coming from a truly discerning space. Another way that discernment protects us is in the dreamscape. While we're asleep, our discernment acts like a barrier, like a force field, that doesn't allow in certain interactions or experiences because it's harnessing us, or it has anchored us into a certain level of being. And should our force field be breached, or an attempt to breach it, we are woken up by our discernment. So it acts in two different ways. It repels any type of interactions or experiences that are not a vibrational match, but then also we are woken up by the discernment and not allowed to follow through with anything that certain entities or certain experiences wanted to breach our realm for. So our level of discernment actually protects us from psychic attacks. Now, with all of this talk about discernment protecting us, the natural question that would arise is, how do we get discernment? We won't be able to acquire true discernment if we have no vested interest in awareness. So broadening our level of awareness is crucial.
Oh my God. So acquiring discernment. I believe she is right. Acquiring, focusing on awareness, and what we mean by awareness in the spiritual community a lot of the times is we mean not just awareness of this world, but inner world, which is inner space, which you can access through meditation, actually. And meditation can take you places. I've been doing it for 15 years, let me tell you that. That's a very good way to gain discernment, is meditation. Disciplining the mind is a very, very big thing to me when it comes to talking about discernment, because you have to have a disciplined mind. And you have to know your own energy. You have to know your own frequency. And that I think are very two key important factors in gaining discernment. So let's get back to it. Video's almost over anyways. We'll talk about it for a little bit more.
To developing discernment. But then on top of that, what happens is that we learn about discernment through the trials and the tribulations of life. How else would we possibly know? And so because of that, reflection is a deeply vital process, because it allows us to be able to gather information and deep understanding about our past experiences and our present experiences that all go towards the cultivation of discernment. So increasing our level of awareness is absolutely vital to cultivating discernment. After that, we have retrospection, because it's only by reflecting upon our past experiences can we learn from them and then apply that to the future. And then third, what we have is balancing our intellect with our intuition, because the intellect and the intuition fully merged and fused is what discernment truly is. So it's able to use both faculties, both our intellectual ability to use logic, to be able to be practical and assess something, to see if it all adds up, and then also be brave enough to see if there's any plot holes, rather than fill them in ourselves with our own cognitive dissonance or our own blind spots. Logic will also ask...
Real quick, I won't shrink down the camera, but yes, what she just said there, yes.
Us to engage our higher reasoning as well. So it's a certain level of critical thinking that is required on ourselves, as well as an ability for sincerity. That, combined with our intuition, our ability to know things without fully knowing why, or sense things without fully being able to explain why we sense them. When these two faculties are fused together, where neither one is overpowering one another, but yet they're working together, what ends up happening is we're developing a feedback loop with our higher self, since the hemispheres of our body-mind are being integrated. The fourth and the most important way to cultivate discernment is to truly understand how important nuance is to awakening. Discernment would be incomplete without the capacity for nuance. In fact, discernment is the ability to recognize and apply nuance. Sometimes we have a problem with developing discernment because we intentionally block ourselves off from crucial awareness. This is because the crucial awareness would be a threat to our worldview in some way. Like,
So what I think she means by this crucial awareness and threatening the worldview. So I mean, I talked about it with Joe on the Saturday show. The habitus is a term. I'll look for that Truman Show video too and try to link that in the description. But the habitus is a term of the worldview, of the way society should be, how society should work, and things like that. And there's a lot of people who are not willing to backtrack and admit that they might have been wrong about some things. I've done a lot of that. I mean, shit, I've been to the drawing board probably thousands of times in these 15 years, going back and just reevaluating and trying to bring myself to that level of awareness also. I wholeheartedly think that we do subconsciously sometimes block ourselves from achieving our goals, and that's something that each and every one of you kind of have to consider. And that's why, again, I recommend meditation. So, we'll talk about that here in a sec. The video's got 2 more minutes left.
Like when it would mean we would have to accept that evil and evil intentions exist. When this happens, we cannot fully develop discernment because we are not able to conceive of anything outside of our level of consciousness. We cannot raise our consciousness if we are blocking off the very knowledge that would raise our frequency. So it becomes a vicious cycle. And yet, once we have raised our frequency to a certain threshold, nuance enters the equation and becomes the most important factor on our journey. It's what will allow us to recognize finer and finer distortions held within our inner world and the outer world. It will allow us to perceive what's in between the polarities of falsehood and true, good and evil, beneficial and destructive.
Summing it all up.
And by doing so, it will allow us to navigate from a mature perception that is flexible and multifaceted. If judgment takes from our past experiences and superimposes them onto the present moment, verbatim, mechanically, discernment learns from the past experiences. It applies those lessons to the present moment, but it also allows the present moment to be totally new and work in unknown ways. As long as we are in this reality, we will be learning discernment. No one is exempt from discernment or the journey of cultivating it. What happens is we allow the refinement process of our discernment to grow sharper and sharper to the best of our capacity and from what we have learned from our life experiences. And by doing so, we step further and further into our own spiritual sovereignty. I hope this has helped you further refine your discernment. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimension.
Sarah, you're freaking awesome. Another 10 out of 10 video from The Alchemist. So I think we kind of hit the point here, guys. I think really discernment is very important. And she nails it down. It's important not only for protection. It's important for you to dictate what is actually true and have that foresight to see what is actually true to you and most likely a lot of other people. So one thing I do want to break down, I think I'm going to go into this for a little bit. I'm going to give this a little bit of a talk here. So I'm going to talk about something called alchemy real fast. And just because of her name, The Alchemist, too, and alchemy. So a lot of people, yes, alchemy is a literal physical thing. It was the predecessor of chemistry in the early days, I believe, back in the days of I think it was like 14th through 16th century alchemists were around, and I think upwards of the 17th and 18th they were still there. So, but there's also another side of alchemy. It's the metaphorical aspect of alchemy. It's the symbolic aspect of alchemy, the transformation of the human being. So they talk about turning lead into gold. So remember, in order there to be gold, there first must be lead. What that means is changing us from this state, from the symbolic and figurative context of alchemy, changing us from this state of matter to a more divine state, a more aligned state. And we do this in certain processes through meditation, through shadow work, through, I would even say, exercise, calcination, Exercise falls into the calcination category of alchemy. And then, that's what we're doing on this journey during this awakening. Is we're all kind of our own little spiritual alchemists. We are transforming ourselves. We're metamorphosizing ourselves into our higher self, our future self. We're pushing forward. And during that, we want to help facilitate what's going on this planet right now. And I really, in the 15 years I've been doing this, and I was not completely ready to do this until now. I still had a lot of things I had to work out in me. I had a lot of my own alchemy I had to undergo. So, if you guys are really interested on this topic, we can do a separate podcast about it. I am not. Now, let me make something clear. All right, because I had touched base with an old friend of mine today and got a very interesting comment. So what I'm going to say is this. I am not bashing on you. If you are a Christian, atheist, or anything like that. I'm not bashing on you. Okay? Or any kind of organized religion, if that's what you choose to practice. When it comes to that level of the playing field, all right, is if it works for you, it works for you. Okay? The only thing that I personally feel is that when you choose. So, it seems OBS cut out the last couple of minutes of what I was saying. So, here I am again. So, what I meant is when you choose that, you kind of close yourself off to anything outside of the realm or spectrum of your belief to help you grow any further. That, I think a lot of people need to use discernment even with their own religions and their own philosophies, their own spiritualities. I mean, I do with mine. I can't tell you how many times I've been back to look at who it is here. Hold on, Mama, you want to come say hi? Oh, this is Luna. Say hi. Say hi, girl. See? Say hi, girl. Say hi. Oh. So, as I was saying, you gotta have. Hold on, baby girl. Let me set you down. You gotta have discernment too, when it even comes to your own beliefs and your own practices. So, it's not a bad thing to look outside of the box. Other than that, guys, I gotta head out. I gotta get cut off. Again, thank you, OPS. Thank you, Jill, for following me. I really appreciate you guys. It's people like you that make me push forward in helping facilitate this great awakening on this planet.